So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and actually to a brand new map, which I'm quite pleased to premiere on this channel, because it's been a little while, I think, since we've started to see sort of new maps come out on a regular basis. Like, we've seen them here and there since 0.97 release, but ever since then, obviously people were quite exhausted after the push that it took to release 0.97, and with Silmarillion coming out as well, obviously development around Reforged did slow a little bit, but I do think it's actually starting to pick up again a little bit, which is good to see. Yeah, this is a new map which has been built. I think it's called the Blood Marsh, which is an interesting name for it. I'm not really sure whether to classify this one as a siege or not, because usually it requires a pretty clear attack-defense sort of split for me to classify it as such, and I don't really think that this map counts as that, although we'll see how the battle plays as it goes along. Some interesting features, several lakes running through the map. Obviously there's those orc ruins as well, which are sort of precariously placed on the edge of that slope. Several cliffs and mesas as well, which sort of block advances down several ways, so it will be funneled down certain avenues, this battle. But we'll go through the blue team first of all, which I believe are all made up of good factions of Middle-earth. And the player who sent me this battle replay, which is a sure sign of quality I'm sure, is Sin of the Dark Cloud. He's going to be playing as Mirkwood. Mirkwood are strong in 0.97, certainly. I think certainly the addition of the Ents made Mirkwood a very different proposition. They still have very, very strong archers, not the strongest among the elves, because Lothlorien have overtaken them in that regard now, but their archers are still far in excess of what most other factions can produce. Their infantry is still very, very strong, and it can have its armour upgraded as well, so it can mitigate one of its weaknesses somewhat. And also they have the power of the Ents and several of their higher tier units as well. So definitely a very well-rounded faction, Mirkwood. They definitely have all the tools necessary to make themselves one of the stronger factions in the game, to my mind. Woodland Round Patrol here at the front. Obviously Mirkwood can have a lot of their units hide as well, which can make them quite an awkward proposition on certain maps. We'll see if that turns out to be a bit of a problem for the enemy here. But the Woodland Round Patrol, the entry-level Mirkwood archers, so you know what to expect from them, really. They may lack a little bit in terms of armour next to most other factions, sort of entry-level frontline archer, but they do have a lot more damage, and of course the fact they can hide makes them a little bit more awkward to deal with as well. Spears of Emondwyr. The Emondwyr units are of course Mirkwood's basic units, and so you can read from that their armour is not brilliant, but you know, their skill and overall their stats are much better than what you would expect from a similar unit from a non-elven faction. So they will be able to hold their own even against basic infantry on the other side of things, but they do have limits to what they can accomplish, of course. If you come up against a genuinely sort of higher quality unit on the other side of things from any other faction, the Spears of Emondwyr will struggle to deal their damage quickly enough to make themselves worth it in that sense. Elders of the Elven King with their Silverthorn arrows, of course, very, very strong archers, very strong in melee as well. Not very many of them in the unit, so they really only work as a foil to the rest of Mirkwood's archers when you have a lot of other archers around them. But as a core to your archer force, they're very, very strong, of course, and their special projectiles really do give them a little bit something extra. Warns of Amonlank, a unit that I'm a big fan of, because of course they're really strong archers as well. No special projectiles on these lads, but as soon as they're out of ammunition, they do become armour-piercing shock infantry with those big two-handed axes of theirs, which makes them very multifaceted. Obviously, the elves do, as a general rule, lack a bit of AP in melee, Lothlorien being the exception to that, of course, but Mirkwood, they do have this unit which can provide that for them. And then there's also the Greenwood Rangers over here. Elven Rangers, of course, the best in the game because they have an extra point of damage over their contemporaries from other factions. The Greenwood Rangers, though, are probably the worst of them, purely, but not really because of anything to do at range, because at range they're pretty much identical. But in melee, they do pull out, I think, a single sword. Whereas obviously the Wardens of Elos Tyrian pull out two swords, which gives them higher melee defense, and the Lothlorien Rangers pull out a two-handed sword, which gives them higher melee attack. So the Greenwood Rangers maybe lack a little bit in melee next to those two units, but it's not really that important. Like, Rangers first and foremost are there for their ranged capabilities. If you're putting them into melee too early, you're doing something wrong. Elder Council, Spear, Javelin hybrids, very, very useful for zoning out cavalry, because Mirkwood, their the lower numbers in their army can be a bit of a problem if cavalry is able to swarm over them, because charges can really have an impact on them quickly. This is a good unit for zoning them out at range and in melee. Just in behind them we have some, I think that's Hiri Peng, indeed it is, upgraded, so more archers. At the back we have, well, upgraded archers as well, so they're obviously intending to get into a skirmish fight a little bit more perhaps. Elven King's Palace Guard without the armour upgrade here, but that doesn't really matter too much. They're still one of the strongest units of infantry in the game. Anti-cavalry as well, AP, all of the good stuff. And then back here in the trees as well, some Huntsmen of Amonlank, so the regular cavalry that Mirkwood can bring. Similar sort of story here as it is with the Sindar of the Girdle, in the fact that they are very vulnerable to range fire because they don't even have multiple HP. You know, they do actually have, I think, a very slight shield value in spite of the fact they're not carrying a shield. But it's very, very minor, so even that isn't going to really make too much of a difference. But when it comes to being in melee among spear cavalry, they're probably the best in melee against other cavalry, at least of this tier. Obviously, multiple HP cavalry will beat them. But a very, very effective unit because of their really high melee defense and high stats. It can make them really difficult to deal with because, of course, high melee defense makes it difficult to hit them in the first place. Blades of Emondwyr, another line of them, so just a basic line infantry merc would have available to them. Again, similar story to the spears in front, only they are able to punch above their weight in terms of an infantry fight, certainly, because of course they don't have the spear malice to deal with, but again, limits to what they can do. Very similar to the other entry-level elven units from other factions. Hiri Lung with the armor upgrade makes them obviously a little bit tougher in melee and at range, but still archers are still going to be a bit of a problem for a unit like this. But very, very effective in melee, certainly. Mirkwood's units in melee, high melee defense, especially when you upgrade the armor like this on a unit like the Hiri Lung, it can make them very difficult to deal with in a melee fight. Only the best will do. And then, of course, the Sindar of the Girdle. Probably, in terms of cavalry, one of the most difficult units to deal with as well, because once again, they're just difficult to hit. Like, even arrows as well, you have to burn through the multiple HP before they'll have a great impact on the Sindar of the Girdle. Capable of dealing out just as much damage as Lance Knights, capable of mowing through cavalry as well, just like a unit of melee cav. One of the most well-rounded units of cavalry in the game, certainly. And combined with the Huntsman, they're going to have a bit of backup as well. Now, moving to the middle, we have Y2K86, who's going to be playing as Arthedain. So Arthedain going for a little bit more of the budget approach here on the front line with their archers. Evendim archers obviously not going to be able to do too much in the way of damage, but they will be able to absorb a little bit of pressure with those shields they wear on their back, and obviously they're not the most expensive archer anyway. Just in behind we have some Arthedain men at arms with both armor upgrades as well, so the full plate armor with the mail underneath. Yeah, so it's a good unit to have on the front line. They're not that they're not a showstopper in melee, but they are very reliable, especially when you upgrade their armor like this. Very similar to the Gondor infantry in many ways. Obviously Gondor have got a bit more of a well-rounded infantry force to put around their heavy infantry units like that, but even so, I think a good choice for Arthedain. Lots more men at arms as well. Most of their units are hidden in the trees, it has to be said. Some Evendim spearmen there. Evendim spears, of course, a popular choice for Arthedain because among spear militia among the kingdoms of men, this is one of the better examples because they have decent stats. You know, all around sort of more well trained, I suppose you would say, than some of the other spear militias from the Western kingdoms. Having said that, they are still spear militia, so if you rely too heavily on them to hold the front line, you will be disappointed in what they're able to accomplish. They're really just there to support units that are better and more important than themselves, but they do a very good job of that nonetheless. Dismounted Knights of Illuminus, obviously one of the things that Arthedain do pride themselves on are their knights and their Dismounted Knights of Illuminus. Very, very powerful units, mainly because of how tough they are. Like the mounted and the dismounted variant are very, very difficult to kill off. They can sit in the middle of the line and just sort of keep ploughing on for a long, long time. The same unit model has been used ever since vanilla, and why not? Whoever made this certainly did a brilliant job on it. We have some Illuminus Gate Guards here at the back, obviously much like the other pikes from the Arnorian factions. The higher tier pike example in all of them is able to buff morale of nearby units, so they act as a bit of a morale battery for the front line, and the Illuminus Gate Guards are that example for Arthedain, and also a lot of Arthedain pikemen with the breastplate armour upgrade as well. Good to see. Obviously this is one of the things that Arthedain can certainly do. They can definitely put on a very large phalanx, and it is looking like that's what Arthedain has done here. The Mounted Knights of Illuminus are going to be riding today, as well as the Royal Court of House Armley, so both of the higher tier units of Arthedain Cavalry, multiple HP Lancers and Lance Knights. It is expensive to do this, but as long as you micro them well, it is worthwhile because they're so tough to kill, both of these units, with their armour, their shields, and just their defensive values in general. But their numbers could prove to be a problem. Like, they may need some support, but if the Mirkwood Cavalry comes to their aid, that's a very scary cavalry force indeed. Then at the back of the units we can see anyway, a couple of units of Dunedain Peacekeepers to add into the mix as well. A very nice unit of line infantry that focuses on attack over defence. And then finally, for the blue team, as I sort of spin around and try and find them, we have Imladris, played by Death Eater. Most of his army is going to be hidden because they're in the trees. You can see obviously Eldarenway archers are hidden, there's archers of Rivendell that are hidden, but we can see some spears of Rivendell and some Imladris sentries, so double phalanx as it were. I've never really been the biggest fan of the spears of Rivendell, to be honest with you. They do have the armour upgrade here, but I've never really seen this unit perform all that well, to be honest with you. It does have a place, I know it does, because I know in theory what they're supposed to be good at. They're supposed to be like a good all-rounder where you can have them as a supporting unit for your units on the front line, or you can use them to zone out cavalry and the like, but in my experience, like, it's just better to cut them and go for something else, at least from what I've seen. But it's highly possible that Death Eater can use them well here, especially in conjunction with the Imladris sentries. It's a pretty gnarly front line. There's Imladris Guardians in there as well, who may or may not have the armour upgrade, we shall see. And then over here, we have some Eldarenway Lancers, obviously a really, really powerful unit of Lancers overall in terms of the Lancers that don't have multiple HP. They're probably the strongest in the game, just because of their stats overall. The Eldarenway units in general have got the stats you would expect to see from a bodyguard unit, only with more numbers in the unit, which makes them, at least initially, more dangerous than most bodyguard units. But of course they do start to lose those numbers a little bit more quickly because of their lack of multiple HP. But even so, very capable of looking after themselves in melee against other cavalry, even if it's not their ideal position. And then over on the other side, unsurprisingly, the general is going to be the Gwaithir Rockdor, another unit of really strong Lance Knights. In terms of overall ability, I would say they're probably the best Knights in the game overall, because while there are Knights that are tougher, like the Knights of Venuminous and the Camel's Dragon Knights, and there are Knights which are faster and arguably more dangerous, like the Horse Lords of Ulmo, I think the Gwaithir Rockdor are the best compromise, the best mix of everything. Yeah, obviously all of the blue team have gone for 2 units of higher end cavalry, it must be said. But let's go and see what he's going to be facing off against. So Imladris over on this side will be facing off against Rhun, played by BMK Overlord of the Dark Cloud. So interesting matchup this. Rhun's AP is actually going to be somewhat useful against Imladris, but their compromise for their melee defense may end up costing them against the superior Imladris infantry. Carmel's Chosen is where the Imladris runic bodyguard is going to be, which is an interesting choice. So he's going to be fighting on the front line rather than in any Carmel's Dragon Knights trying to zone the cavalry out. But it looks as though actually what Rhun are going to be doing is setting up in a more defensive posture. Gamprim on the front line alongside Flagrim, so full phalanx with AP. Unfortunately for Rhun, the Halberdiers will find themselves outranged by the pikes from Imladris across the way, but hopefully Rhun will probably be trying to deal with the pikes in some other way, because it's very unlikely that any faction has very few factions have got what it takes to go head on against the Imladris sentries and emerge victorious. But it's still a pretty gnarly front line. We'll see how Imladris choose to deal with it. We've got some Scion Rim backing them up as well, obviously a very reliable unit of heavy spears. It'll mean at the very least Imladris takes a little bit more time hacking and slashing their way through the runic lines. Variag Mercenaries as well. We couldn't really see how many archers Imladris had, but the Variag Mercenaries are probably the best choice anyway, because Imladris, while they're the least archer focused of all the elven factions, they will still at least have more quality at the high end of their archers than Rhun do. Rhun, while they do have a very varied skirmish line, I think they've done the right thing here by going for the more sort of attrition-y, skirmishy archer in the Variag Mercenaries, even though they don't have the armour upgrade. I imagine Rhun may very well have gone for crossbows or javelins, one of the two, or maybe both, would be very useful against Imladris to act as an equaliser. And also, we have the Dragon's Breath, so obviously the Dragon's Breath is one of those units which I do think needs toning down a bit. But it will mean that Imladris maybe has to advance a little bit more quickly than they would ideally like in this situation. Rhun does need to be careful though, because the trajectory does look as though it would carry it through their own men. And it is quite easy to get friendly fire with the Dragon's Breath like that. And there is also some Dragon's Breath crossbows over here. Line of sight, as always, will be a massive issue on them. If they can somehow get into a good position to rain fire down on the Imladris lines, then they will be very useful. But 99 out of 100 times, the Dragon's Wrath crossbows will always be floundering, trying to get those bolts to fire, and they just won't. Then we have Inarius playing as Umbar, going up against Arthedain in the middle. We have some Harbingers of Castamere, very, very strong unit of heavy swordsmen, of course. We have some Balagai footmen holding down the flanks. We have some Balaketh marksmen who don't have the armour upgrade, actually. Obviously they will be able to defeat Ebendim archers in a skirmish fight, but is that going to be a worthwhile use of their time? I mean, it's going to have to be what they do, I think, depending on how they choose to approach this. Obviously the Arthedain cavalry is also looming at the top of that slope over there. A Dunaim Shield Guard over on that side. The front line is going to be made up of Balagai pikemen and Alcarondas Legion, which overall should be enough to give Umbar the advantage in a frontline fight against Arthedain, although Arthedain probably have more pikes and higher quality pikes than the Balagai pikemen. It's really going to come down to if the Alcarondas Legion have got the muscle to push their way through the Arthedain lines. And then Well, there must be a lot of hidden units for Umbar. I mean, I'd imagine there's rangers and maybe some crossbows around here as well, because that's a very small army which has been brought. This, however, very clear to see what's going on over here. Darkwolf 44 playing as Gondor, and here I thought it was going to be like perfectly split, good versus evil. Darkwolf 44 ruining it at the last minute. He's going to be playing as Gondor, so Gondor will just say they've been conquered by Mordor already. We've got some Gondor militia infantry, Nimlothian Honor Guard. Well, this is all a big blob, so I'm just going to have to go through it very generally, I think. Wardens of Minas Ithil are in there, there's Fountain Guard, we've got some Caer Andros Marksmen, I think, indeed, and some Citadel Guard, a lot of militia, I have to say. Veterans of Osgiliath without the armour upgrade, I saw them poking out just then, and then some Axemen of Lasarnak without the armour upgrade, as well as a Catapult as well. Interesting choices, sort of a more numbers focused Gondor approach, which is probably actually acts as a foil to Umbar quite well, to be honest with you. But we shall see how they choose to approach this, because there's still quite a distance between Arthedain and Umbar. Mirkwood, of course, are a little bit further back again. So I think actually the first engagements will probably happen over here, mainly because of the Dragon's Breath cannon. So without further ado, let's begin. The Dragon's Breath is going to reform. I mean, they do have this sort of slightly higher terrain that they can utilise over here, which is probably what they're going to do, to be honest with you. I mean, Rhun, this is going to be quite a dicey fight for them. I mean, it's going to come down to whether or not they're able to hold on long enough for supporting units to get the work done, because Rhun, while their infantry is good, it's certainly not on the same level as Imladris' infantry is. And we can see that Imladris' army is starting to reveal itself, and indeed, yes, the Imladris Guardians do have the armour upgrade, Eldarenway Archers and Archers of Rivendell as well. So a good mix of Imladris' entry level and higher tier archers, with the Archers of Rivendell also having the armour upgrade, which is nice. Definitely give them an edge. Eldarenway Spearmen and Swordmasters can be found over here as well. So a lot of Eldarenway, definitely a more high quality focus. I heard the thud of the Dragon's Breath there, ripping right through the centre of those units, hitting several units. Spears of Rivendell, a few Imladris Guardians, a few Archers of Rivendell. Imladris, they need to sort of make their mind up here. I think maybe Death Eater is sort of tripping over himself a little bit here. This isn't maybe the most well thought out advance, and he can't afford to just sit here either. Otherwise the Dragon's Breath will be enough to do its thing. But this, however, is a bit of a devastating mistake from BMK Overlord, because I can only assume the Carmel's Chosen were forgotten about, or he somehow didn't know that the General's Bodyguard unit cannot hide. So as a result, they did get charged into. Their multiple hit points did save them to an extent there. The Carmel's Dragon Knights reveal themselves now, but too late, and that he's very lucky the General didn't die there, because the Knights charged into the side of the unit where the General was located. But the Carmel's Chosen taking a few losses there. The Gwythi Rockdoor trying to get away. Maybe not as devastating as it could have been. BMK Overlord's quite lucky, I think, actually, because he could have lost his General there. And the Carmel's Chosen, I assume that must have just been a mistake. He must have just forgotten to move them. Carmel, again, you know, a bit of a mistake from Death Eater though, pulling his Knights out, but not pulling them out far enough, and the Dragon Knight's able to get a charge off that connects with the Gwythi Rockdoor. Once again, the multiple HP of the Gwythi Rockdoor saving them to an extent, but still, the Dragon Knight's definitely coming out of that engagement the better. Carmel's Dragon Knight's moving forward once again. And they're going to charge head on with one another, although the Dragon Knight's actually losing their stomach for that, and now they're going to be showing their backs to the Eldarenway Archers. They're going to be taking damage all the while. That was another shot from the Dragon's Breath cannon. It did actually clip the Gwythi Mirdain as well, so a good amount of power in that unit was actually lost there. Very strange sort of engagement this is so far. Both sides having a bit of a rough time of it to some extent. The Dragon Knights still being shot. I mean, the Dragon Knights, like I said, alongside the Knights of Illuminus, are probably the tankiest Knights in the game. Under this sort of thing, even really strong Elven Archers like this will take a little while before they start inflicting large amounts of casualties onto a unit like this. Dragon Knights, however, are also slower as a result, so sort of this heavy cataphract style unit. I mean, they're trying to shoot head on. Oh, that was a bit of a shame there. I mean, they had the opportunity there to charge into the Archers of Rivendell, then maybe pull through, but unfortunately BMK Overlord kind of lost his bottle there, which is a bit disappointing to see. I know that there was Imladris cavalry closing in, but it was the Eldarenway Lancers, which, to be honest with you, are not as much of a concern for them in melee as the as the Gwaithir Rockdoor would be. Meanwhile, still firing the cannon into the trees. It's a little bit difficult to get good shots in the trees here, to be honest with you, but the archers of Rivendell continuing to fire. The Imladris archers in general trying to make some sort of impression on the runic position. I mean, so far the Dragon's Breath hasn't been devastating, but you'd imagine that it would have a positive impact at some point or another. Actually, you can see over here the Alcarondas Faithful and the Warlords of Umbar revealing themselves. So Umbar spending a bit of money on their really high tier units of cavalry as well. Definitely a lot of high tier cavalry today. Gondor really the only faction that hasn't brought any of theirs. At least not that I can see. I don't see the Mithrandir's retinue anywhere anyway. But Gondor have definitely invested more into their numbers. Umbar not keen to advance uphill into a numerically superior Arthedain army, and I certainly don't blame them for that. It's not a particularly appealing prospect to advance, or especially not when Mirkwood are liable to back them up very quickly as well. Again, the thud of the Dragon's Breath. You can barely see it from the distance there. In loose formation here, but still clipping the edge of the archers of Rivendell. Forward comes the Carmel's Dragon Knights once again. I think this time he is going to follow through on his charge, the Runic Cataphracts this time. Maybe a little bit narrower of a charge this, but they do at least manage to charge into the archers of Rivendell and do the business. A few of them starting to fall away now, and they have been under archer fire for a little while. They've absorbed a lot of archer fire as well though. In come the Royal Court of House Armlaith, as well as the Gwaithir Rockdoor. So the Arthedain cavalry actually heading around to this side as well to try and back Imladris up. It's a bit of an awkward situation for Imladris to be in. I think, you know, if I were Death Eater, I probably would have, for better or worse, charged in my army very quickly to try and close Rhun down. There are Baltroth tribesmen over here, there are Variag mercenaries, but, well, I suppose with the support that is now over here from Umbar and Gondor, that wouldn't be a good idea anymore, because they just find themselves outnumbered and outgunned. But early on, when Umbar and Gondor were still doing their own thing, there may have been an opportunity to close the Rhun down quickly and try and take away the advantage of the Dragon's Breath at range like this. As it is, the Dragon's Breath, it hasn't done anything too devastating so far. Trying to go after the Knights there, I think. But, you know, over time it will still have a pretty big impact on the Imladris army. And so far, not a great deal of movement. Eldraine Lancers still loitering with intent. But again, I feel as though if Imladris is going to make a push over here, they will need a bit of support on foot from some of their allies now. Because with more support coming up here, some Balaketh marksmen obviously, another very nice unit to have in a skirmish fight. The Imladris archers, especially the Eldraine, should still be able to defeat the Balaketh marksmen, to be honest with you, but it's not a particularly efficient fight for them to take, especially not with the support of the Runic archers as well. So Rhun at this point looking fairly comfortable and dug in their position. But the same is also true on the other side for Arthedain at the top of this hill. Umbar will not want to move further forwards into that. Gondor is still down here as well with all their militia. But so far, it's gone to a bit of a lull this. Neither side wants to be the one to charge forward and put their team at a huge disadvantage with an ill-prepared attack, but someone has to take the plunge eventually, and Imladris kind of have already by moving into range of the Dragon's Breath cannon, so now what will Death Eater do? A lot of his units are now hidden in the trees, which of course means they can't be targeted as such. Ah, there we go. Yeah, once again the Dragon's Breath cannon through the middle of the Gwaithir Mirdain and the Eldraine Lancers. Again, not devastating loss in terms of numbers, but the relative strength of these two units, you really don't want to be losing many more, especially not from the Gwaithir Mirdain. They can be a real powerhouse on the front line for Imladris, especially in a situation where they clearly have invested more heavily into their quality, so their army is going to be smaller. What will they do? So far, Rhun getting nice and comfortable. There are a few casualties on the front line, probably from a few volleys that the Imladris archers have sent forth, but nothing too devastating. The runic phalanx of Flagrim, Gamprim and Sionrim still looking strong enough to be able to withstand the initial Imladris assault should it come. Who is going to blink first? That is the question. More water over here, albeit from a river this time, and it's actually outside the bounds of the map. It is an interesting map, this. Lots of trees, so obviously hidden units, or the ability to hide some of your units is obviously going to be very important. I think that is why Imladris haven't been forced into moving forward already, because obviously their units cannot be targeted with the cannon now, nor can they actually be targeted by archers should Rhun and Umbar wish to put some pressure on. Meanwhile, Arthedain actually moving down the hill, and as a result, I mean, it's a little bit surprising actually that Y2K didn't send any anti-cavalry support down the hill with them, even if it was just Avendim spears, because the Carmel's Dragon Knights there had a clear charge right into the Arthedain marksmen, and of course they're going to take it. In come the Warlords as well, very similar kind of unit, maybe not quite as tanky as the Dragon Knights, but obviously differences at the really high end become fairly negligible. Arthedain marksmen taking some not unnoticeable losses from the cav there, being forced back behind the spears. It's good that Arthedain are at least starting to put some pressure on, but Sindar of the Girdle also moving forward. I mean, they still have the high ground, but they definitely needed their archers to get into a position where they can fire here. Arthedain's archers, though, are a little bit more designed to be in a skirmish fight and over a long period of time getting their value for money. Whereas in this sort of situation, when they're sort of taking the initiative, they maybe want some higher tier archers to do damage more quickly. I mean, I suppose at least from their perspective, it's just Gondor militia infantry that are charging forwards. What have we got going on over here? Eldrannway archers heading closer to the front line. I mean, this is a bit of a strange one from Death Eater. This unit has been sent forward without too much in the way of assistance. I mean, this is just begging Rhun to send forward some Flagrim to intercept them in melee. They can definitely look after themselves in melee, but they are liable to being overwhelmed when they have no support nearby. Yeah, a bit of a strange decision this, to be honest with you. Variag mercenaries firing away. Time will tell what they want to do. Camel's Dragon Knights to Sindar of the Girdle, so again it's just sort of playing a game of cat and mouse. The Gondor Militia Infantry have moved forward a little bit, but they still have the support of the Dragon Knights. There's also the Warlords of Umbar back there as well, so certainly in terms of a rapid response force, the Knights are on hand. But the Avendim Spears and Avendim Archers going up against the Gondor Militia Infantry, clearly neither side wanting to risk anything vitally important to their war efforts. Arthedain Pikemen as well. I mean, I'd be tempted to have some Pikemen a little bit further forward because they can be so slow. Mirkwood's still content to hold their position a little bit further back. Still the Eldrannway Archers. I'm not really sure what Death Eater's hoping to accomplish by doing this, to be honest with you, but he is at least firing back now, so now that he's in up close and personal, he's going to start firing into this front line. Although firing into the front line might not be the best idea. I mean, the Gamprim are there, you might hit some of them, but for the most part it is Flagrim, and obviously they are shielded from the front. So they will be able to absorb quite a bit of punishment, to be honest with you. Still the Silent Room behind as well, so not really a great deal changing. I mean, there's movement now, certainly from the blue team, but the red team is dug in. I mean, the red team are not going to move, I think that's quite clear. They are going to be the ones that want to hold their ground here. And the blue team, I mean, because Imladris has sort of danced around in front of the runic defensive position here and has taken damage from it, like the initiative, I wouldn't say the initiative is in favour of the red team, but the momentum of the battle is in favour of the red team, I suppose you'd say. Gondor Militia Infantry now moving forward, so maybe trying to carry that through. I mean, it's not exactly, I don't know if I call it momentum either, to be honest with you. Very strange battle, but the Gondor Militia Infantry pushing forward, forcing the Arthedain archers backwards once again. Arthedain clearly wanting to get their archers into a position where they can start to do damage over time. However, nothing too decisive as of yet is going to be happening, I don't think. Still very content to play the long game, both sides here. Both sides playing this, again, the game of cat and mouse, and this is one of it has the feel of a battle that when someone does move in and commit, the dominoes will start to fall, but it will be a slow build, a slow burn to be sure. Dragon Knights moving into position. Royal Court of House Armlaith coming back over to here. Arthedain moving their own cavalry back to make sure they're not so outgunned from a cavalry perspective over here. Imladris still not having the best time of it, you'd have to say. The Eldarenway archers, one thing that I suppose is being gained by doing this is the fact that the archers that are firing at them don't have the damage to really kill the Eldarenway archers quickly, because obviously Eldarenway armour is very, very good. But they're still taking losses here, the Eldarenway archers. They're not really doing much damage in response, so Death Eater's not really gained much. I mean, the Eastron crossbows are also over here, and if they started to fire, they would have an impact, because of course armour-piercing bolts would do a lot of damage really very, very quickly. And it's not even as if he's... I mean, the Baltroth tribesmen are in full view. If the Eldarenway archers could start shooting into the Baltroth tribesmen, they're not very well armoured at all. It would be a fairly ideal... ideal get, I would say. Meanwhile, in comes Sin of the Dark Cloud with his Sindar of the Girdle. That's very weird. He decided to pull out of that charge so close to when it was actually ready to connect, and he ended up taking the Archer volley anyway. I would have just followed through on that charge. It would have... oh, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. It would have done some fairly significant damage, only to a unit of Gondor militia infantry, but it would have at least... started to place some doubt in the minds of the Gondorian player about moving forward with under-strength infantry units. Militia infantry at that. But still here on the low ground. I'm wondering actually, is there a way around? All of this cavalry is over here, but yes, there is a way around this lake over here into where the Mirkwood position is. But you can see that Rhun and Umbar are aware of that, and they've got their cavalry placed over here, and based on how defensive the red team have set up so far, I can't imagine they're going to use it aggressively to try and push around, because Mirkwood are over there, even though most of their units are hidden. Yeah, very strange battle this so far. The archers once again are going to come forward, but once again I would imagine they're probably going to be pushed back sooner or later by the infantry. They are going to get at least a volley off this time around. That was a blank shot though, because I think they started moving, so again, nothing really happening. But a very frustrating battle this so far. No one seems to want to do anything. Like, come on lads, grab a hold of your balls and move in someone. There we go, some damage at long last. Sindar of the Girdle charging in and doing what they maybe should have done previously, and getting into the Gondor militia infantry, bisecting that unit, almost completely destroying it. Sindar of the Girdle with obviously very effective charge, and this is the problem with the Gondorian players' strategy here, just moving in with the militia infantry first. They don't have any support anywhere near them, which means they're free to essentially be ripped apart by units that are stronger than themselves. And yeah, this is, unless they can get support up to them quickly, this is going to put the momentum heavily in the favour of the blue team, because obviously Gondor, even though it's only militia, it's still a large portion of their manpower that's going to be lost here, unless reinforcements can be committed. Forward come the Axemen of Lasarnak to try and do just that. We'll see if the AP is able to have an impact. Maybe not on the Evendim Spearmen, but it would on the Arthedain Men-at-Arms. That AP would be useful there, and heavy Axemen like this are not bad against cavalry either, but they will need more support here as the Gondorian archers continue to move in. Citadel Guard, not the most well executed advance that really at all, but there's still time. Royal Court of House Armlaith and Knights of Venuminous over here going toe to toe with the Alcarondas Faithful and Warlords of Umbar. That is a fight which will definitely favour Umbar, especially with the Carmel's Dragon Knights in there as well. And there's also Nimlothian Honour Guard on the way over here, so they could potentially start to wrap up the line here, which they will need to do, because on the front line Gondor's initial assault has gone very poorly. The militia infantry routing and all over the place. The Axemen of Lasarnak now having to assault this Arthedain phalanx unsupported, which is not really what you want. When a phalanx is comfortable, it can become an impossible task to try and deal with it. Yeah, that was an absolutely disastrous assault from Gondor. When I was saying someone should make something happen, that wasn't entirely what I had in mind. I was expecting maybe something a little bit better executed than that, but these Axemen of Lasarnak are still firing. They're still putting pressure up on this side of things because their cavalry was having some joy. Citadel Guard moving in to try and support the Axemen of Lasarnak, but the problem is here the numbers. Arthedain's phalanx is pretty secure, and I can't really see that changing anytime soon. But Cavalry was victorious. The Dragon Knights took a fair beating, but everything else went very smoothly. The Nimlothian Honor Guard are moving in. Sindar of the Girdle need to be very careful here. They're in range of all sorts of ranged units at this point. But if they charge in, they've got other knights and stuff like Nimlothian Honor Guard moving in. Gondor Militia Infantry returning from routing, once again going to pile into the front line to try and keep this assault going. In comes the Dragon Knights. I mean, this probably will be the end of them, because while they did get a rear charge, the pikes will simply turn around and poke those runic knights off. No, they're still alive. Nimlothian Honor Guard again, a bit slow. The Citadel Guard on the front line making things a little bit more even. They will be forcing Arthedain into committing more resources to the front line. Belagaya footmen are also moving forwards. Fountain Guard on the front line now. So now that the quality units have come forward, Gondor having much more luck. It's just a shame they weren't closer to the militia infantry when they first advanced. That would have been a really well executed assault, I think, and it would have forced Arthedain onto the back foot. As it is, Arthedain have maybe got a little bit more room to breathe than they otherwise would have. These archers still firing away, but the problem Arthedain may have here is none of their archers are really that good that they've brought, so they won't be able to deal damage at the rate they would probably want to against some of these units, like the higher quality Gondorian infantry, especially like the Fountain Guard. They'd want to be doing damage faster than they may be able to do here. Meanwhile, really trying to go after the Sindar of the Girdle here. Dunedain Troll Slayers trying to do their thing, trying to throw their javelins, very effective in melee of course as well. There go the Corsair crossbows, very nice micro from Sin there, because these crossbows were doing a lot of damage, both to infantry and cavalry on the blue team. The Sindar of the Girdle, very difficult to stop like this, but they need to. Like, the Umbar cavalry just needs to force path their way to them and stop them from doing this, because Sindar of the Girdle doing their thing. Fountain Guard turning around, which is good. That's good awareness from the Gondorian. And the Sindar of the Girdle now are going to be in trouble as they get sandwiched between Fountain Guard and Warlords of Umbar. Yeah, that's a lot of damage they just took. So Sin, very good at force pathing his cavalry around, but this is a situation that he's going to come out of very battered and bruised. The juddering frame rate there informs me that there must be rangers somewhere around here doing their thing. There are some Athelian rangers, but they're taking damage from something. Umbar moving forward now as well, so yeah, this now is definitely going to go in favour of the red team, with Umbar coming forward in another wave, Belagaya footmen, pikes and Alcarondas Legion backing up the Gondorian assault. Initially it looked like it was going to be a very bad assault from Gondor, but as soon as the elite units arrived, they did manage to salvage the situation. And now, with Umbar backing them up as well, there's no way does this workman-like Arthedain army stand much of a chance, because they've definitely gone for holding power, both at range and in melee. Sort of very pikes focused. Their archers focused around a skirmish fight. They don't have very many genuine damage dealers in their army here, Arthedain, and so they're not going to be able to cut their way through some of these units anywhere near quickly enough. Like, the Peacekeepers are probably the closest thing they have to a damage dealer, and at the end of the day they're still line infantry. They don't have any of the stuff like the Fornoster Rain Knights. They do have some Shoal Slayers, but they don't have any Wardens of the North or Rangers. Some Imladris cavalry is over here trying to do their thing as well. Balakith marksmen that are out of ammunition, keeping this assault on this side going, charging into the Evendim spears. Cycle charging with Balakith marksmen is a new one. Haven't really seen that done before. Meanwhile, over on this side, the runic position still holding its ground. Imladris still, they haven't really committed themselves forward yet, but now would probably be the time. Like, they need to make something happen. Their allies over on the other side are struggling horribly. And a lot of the reinforcements, a lot of the Gondorians and a lot of the Umbar forces have been siphoned off to fuel that attack through the middle. And so Imladris do have more of an opportunity now to try and fight Rhun in a more straight up 1v1, which in terms of quality, of course, Imladris should win. The Baltroth tribesmen are going to be throwing their javies, and the initial damage they're able to do with the javelins and with the Dragon's Breath is going to determine whether or not Rhun can be victorious in this battle. Because in terms of quality of infantry, of course, Rhun, while they're no pushovers, Rhun, but they're not on the same level as Imladris. So they're going to need the units like this to do the business. Gwythi Rockdoor's over here. I'm not really sure what they intend to do over here, though. Not exactly the best of ideas, this, because it's Gamp Rim over here. Like, the Halberdiers will do some pretty nasty damage to those knights if they're not careful. We'll keep an eye on that, because over here, pockets of Arthedain resistance still exist, but Sin content to leave his army in reserve and not support the initial Arthedain force, As a result, Arthedain will lose, but time will tell whether Arthedain was able to do enough damage to allow Mirkwood to go on to defeat the remnants of Gondor and Umbar. I'm not sure. Cavalry in the back lines as well. Alcarondas Faithful and Warlords of Umbar. They've taken a fair amount of damage during their time finishing Arthedain off, which, considering the high concentration of pikes and spearmen they brought, is maybe not too surprising. There were Dunedain Trollslayers at one point as well, but very briefly before they got flattened. There's the Dunedain Shield Guard. They may have retreated, I suppose. There is one unit of Arthedain's which appears to have managed to get out, I think. There's something over here, apparently. Anyway, a Dunedain Shield Guard coming back, so yeah, now it's really just like locusts descending on a field as Arthedain continues to get ripped apart by Gondor and Umbar. Huntsmen of Amonlanc doing their thing, trying to rip away more exposed targets. Again, it's difficult though, because with all the Belagaya spears, pikes, obviously Gondor are very good in the polearm department, so they can be quite difficult to kill with cavalry in this way when there are so many Fountain Guard and Citadel Guard on their line. And also, of course, it's worth saying the Huntsmen of Amonlanc can also be held at arm's length by decent archers, which neither Gondor nor Umbar are hurting for. Meanwhile, this fight over here, they have managed to force their way through the Gwaithir Rock Door, through this front line, and they're going to get into the backfield. Going to go after those Eastron crossbowmen. This could be a fairly decisive factor in this battle, to be honest with you, because the front line, Imladris are winning the front line. If they can stop those archers from firing long enough the Gwaithir Rock Door, Imladris could very well be victorious over here, which the blue team needs at this point. They can't afford Rhun to beat Imladris at this point, because then Mirkwood will have to face the remnants of all three red team factions, which of course would not be ideal for them. Carmel's Shadowbows trying to get into position to shoot right down the line, and they're kind of being successful at that. They're still firing after all, but that won't last too long. The Eldarin Way archers are starting to attack them in melee, which of course is only going to end in victory for one of these units. Over here, Rhun having a little bit more luck, but along most of the line, the Imladris sentries are just so dominant in this sort of fight. Like, very few factions are able to withstand Imladris when they get into this kind of position, and Rhun is not one of them. There goes the Runic General, the Carmel's Chosen, going up against the Gwaithir Mirkwood. That's not a good matchup for them either. That was a bit of a weedy charge into the back lines of Rhun there, but it might be all that it takes, to be honest with you. Let's see here. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Warns of Minas Ithil over here as well. So there is a little bit of support. Another unit of Rangers, but like, they may be multiple HP, but they're still Rangers in melee. Like, 44 of them is not going to be enough to turn the tide in this fight, especially not against units of Eldarin, sword masters and spearmen that are pushing through at this point. And the rest of the runic line is starting to crumble. You know things are bad when higher tier units like the Scion Rim are starting to rout. So a fairly decisive victory, it must be said, for Imladris, at least initially, because it looks as though what's happening over here, well, these armies over here aren't really moving all that far at this point. There's still a lot of red on the radar. There's Castamir's Rangers heading over. There's Eastron crossbows. But a very dominant performance by the Imladris infantry, as you'd expect. That's Imladris at their finest. Well, I say that's their general gone. Caer Andros marksmen coming across, pulling out their swords. I did actually see, and indeed, because of the hill, the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen have clear line of sight and are actually firing their bolts. A true miracle is what we are witnessing today. A flurry of fiery doom, but unfortunately for them, they're about to be closed down by Gwaithir Mirkwood. Taking a lot of range fire though, the Gwaithir Mirkwood. Castamir's Rangers over here as well. I mean, there's still a lot of these ranged units over here which are doing a lot of damage to Imladris, but even with that support, Rhun wasn't able to hold on. There goes the Gondor General as well, which is fairly significant for later on. That means the Gondor forces that will have to try and help Umbar attack Mirkwood may not have what it takes from a morale perspective. The Baltroth tribesmen are coming in here with their little karambit knives and little hand axes. Warlords of Umbar charging in to try and support. Gamp, Rim, very depleted at this point. I mean, with all this support arriving now from Gondor and Umbar, they may be able to finish off Imladris, but that's more valuable resources that they're not going to be able to bring to bear against Mirkwood in the late game, which might prove to be decisive. Imladris Guardians routing, the crossbows and the archers shooting at them point blank. There are a few Imladris forces that push their way through over here, but they're being set upon by marksmen of Caer Andros. The Balakith marksmen are also fairly capable in melee when the numbers are this preferable as well. Let's see over here. There are still Gwaithir Mirdain, and even with the hits they're taking, they're still fighting evenly so far with the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, but you'd imagine that will probably turn around once again. Arrows being loosed still. Ithilien Rangers. Let's see here. Eastron crossbowmen continuing to do their thing. Caer Andros marksmen also doing the same. Well, I'm not really sure how this is going to go, to be honest with you, because Imladris are going to lose ultimately. Like, if it were just Rhun over here, if they didn't have support, they obviously would have lost, but support coming in from Gondor and Umbar just about managed to turn the fight around. But will the red team have what it takes in the end to go up against Mirkwood? Because Mirkwood are almost completely fresh. Like, other than their cavalry, they haven't committed anything. All their ammunition, all their infantry manpower still intact. So it's an interesting way to go about the battle, this. Mirkwood deciding not to support their allies and instead just sort of holding on for the later game. Holding off. So it will be interesting to see if that pans out. Warlords over there still running around. Ithilien Rangers, 17 of them remaining. And that is a good point as well. One of the things you can use to your advantage against Mirkwood is the fact that they don't necessarily have the best armour values. You can skirmish with them fairly effectively. But a lot of the ammunition from the red team across all of the factions has now been used. So they may be forced into a killing ground against Mirkwood that they really don't want to be in, but it's definitely an even looking fight as we proceed into its next phases. And there we go. Imladris, I think they have been fully finished off at this point. Well, there's some Eldarenway Spearmen over there, but units like this, very depleted units, are they going to be that much of an impact? Or are they going to have that much of an impact in the late game? Probably not. You can see over here, scattered bodies. You can see where the initial battle happened. A very bloody fight it was, but Arthedain, of course, considering the path that the blue team have chosen to take, they were never really going to win that as such. Bit of a skirmish has happened as well. Archer to archer, Balakith marksman firing into the Woodland Realm patrol. But Mirkwood going to try and flex their muscles a bit with their archers. The upgraded Hiri Pang, actually, no, pulling back once again. Well, I think we will actually go up to ×6 speed here, because to be honest with you, it's going to take a little while for the red team to get all of their forces back over here. I'm not entirely sure what the blue team have... Like, in this battle, there's been several occasions where they've just sort of been moving around their archers whilst getting shot. And it seems to have been willing. Like, I guess I can see sort of moving around trying to dodge and bob and weave, but it seems like a very odd thing to do. No matter. Back up to ×6 again. As the rest of those forces that were trying to finish off Imladris now move back over to here to help reinforce what will inevitably be a push into Mirkwood territory. Mirkwood, of course, with most of their forces left alive. All three of the red team armies have been battered and bruised to some extent, but will it be enough for Mirkwood to claim victory? I mean, I would be tempted to put my money on Mirkwood in this situation, because they still have enough ammunition to be a real pain. And also, like, Greenwood Rangers over there. Like, all it takes is for Mirkwood to just do a controlled retreat back just far enough for the Greenwood Rangers to rip right across the line. Which is why I think if they do have any cavalry left, the red team would be well served trying to go around and just scout around. Like, if you see a position where Rangers could be, it's never worth taking the risk and assuming they're not there. But again, we shall see, won't we? There's also the catapult, which I haven't really seen actually yet, from Gondor. So will they try to use that? I'm not sure why the charge horn was being sounded there for the Corsair infantry. So the catapult will be an interesting tool in the late game as well.
Our allies have fled the field like cowards.
What have we got going on over here? Still some units in the trees. Shadow bows, only 6 of them though. Nothing too severe, it must be said. The initial probing starting to happen now. Again, it's been a very, it's been a fight that's been kind of strange in terms of sort of long lulls. So we don't need to see the entirety of it this time. We're just going to fast forward here, and yeah, this is it. Sin is doing that, a controlled retreat. He's luring them into the trap. As soon as those Greenwood Rangers start firing, like, there is an art to this. Like, if he's able to sort of wait long enough for the forces to really blob up, then the Greenwood Rangers will have an absolute field day, and that should be enough to secure victory for Mirkwood if he's able to pull it off. But we shall just see about that, won't we? Woodland Realm Patrol, blades out. Mirkwood starting to use their regular archers to fire on the approach. On the Eastron crossbows, like, they may have the armour upgrade here, but against good quality elven arrows, the upgraded Eastron crossbowmen still aren't going to be able to withstand this too well, to be honest with you. Corsair infantry moving forwards. In come the Belagai footmen. I mean, I hope that Umbar aren't going to send forward individual units like that. Gondor were almost made to pay for that last time. Gondorian catapult firing in. The catapult could also be the saviour of the red team here. These Umbar forces are getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves. They need support from more elite units than this. If they charge into the front line, even against Spears of Emondwyr, maybe they're just hoping to bait some of these archers out of hiding. But Sin, few people have played more Third Age than Sin, and he's not going to fall for that. And these Belagai footmen are going to be torn to shreds by the Mirkwood infantry on the front line. They're already depleted, and indeed they're broken and fighting to the death already. So I don't really know what Inarius was hoping to accomplish by charging in such a manner. Hiri Peng moving forwards. Let's see here. Alcarondas Legion. I mean, they need units like the Alcarondas Legion on the front line. I'm just keeping an eye on the Rangers, partly because I don't want to be zoomed in when they start firing, because it could crash the game, and that would be heartbreaking at this point in time. Hiri Peng out of ammunition by the looks of things, but heavy elven swordsman with an armour upgrade. Very strong in melee still. Maybe not as strong as the Alcarondas Legion, but Blades of Emondwyr in back to support. In terms of numbers, Mirkwood should be just fine on the front line for the time being. They're going to need pikes. I mean, that is one of the things that Mirkwood do lack. It's a very clearly defined weakness of theirs. They don't have any phalanx units of their own. So if they do get caught in a pure infantry fight where the enemy is able to leverage a phalanx formation against them, they can struggle. But they do have Ents that can help break that up, and of course their main tool for dealing with that sort of thing are their archers. Hiri Peng over on that side as well. Real crossfire coming. Yeah, there are the Greenwood Rangers. Now they're firing. As we start to see the blood sprays come up. Maybe, is that too soon? I don't think so. I think enough of the forces have blobbed up. There's Alcarondas Legion there. There's very vulnerable unupgraded Axemen of Lasarnak, which will fall in droves to Greenwood Ranger fire. Yeah, and this is an issue. Rhun are moving around the side, which is something that's sorely needed. Like, the worst thing they could have done was sort of blob themselves up. Unfortunate bit of friendly fire there from the catapult, but that's the sort of risk you always take with the catapult. So far, Mirkwood having this fight all their own way, you'd have to say. Meanwhile, the Dragon's Breath artillery crew, they're going to try and come around and quickly interrupt the Hiri Peng from firing at the very least, to sort of alleviate some of the punishment that the front line is currently taking. You know, Mirkwood, they don't have that much infantry though. Like, they've invested so much into their archers and their javelins as well, and their cavalry, that their infantry line was relatively thin on the ground when all's said and done. The Dunedain Troll Slayers did escape actually, so Arthedain still have 18 soldiers on the field. Citadel Guard moving in now. Greenwood Rangers still firing. Fountain Guard moving around from the other side as well. Which of course they sorely need to stop these archers from firing into them. But of course the problem with doing this, Athelian Rangers and Wards of Minas Ithil getting ripped to shreds. The Fountain Guard also are not really going to be able to chase down the Greenwood Rangers should Sin decide to run them away. And of course the Wardens of Amon Lank, such as they are, will probably be able to defeat the Fountain Guard in melee, to be honest with you. Numbers advantage, AP, very strong unit in their own right. But at the very least they're stopping Mirkwood from firing on the front line, which they really need to do. The longer they can do that, the more likely it is that units like Fountain Guard and Alcarondas Legion will start to bite in onto the limited Mirkwood infantry that they have. So it is a delicate balancing act for Mirkwood this. They do need to manage themselves. They need to keep their archers firing as best they can. Otherwise, the brute strength of the red team could still be enough to see them win this fight. Like over on this side, Nimlothian Honor Guard, Citadel Guard, without any sort of range support coming from the other side, stuff like the Blades of Emenduir and Hiri Peng won't be enough to stop this from being a victory. Hiri Peng now retreating. Rhun, interestingly enough, are also backing up as well. Like, they really shouldn't be doing that. Like, Huntsmen of Amon Lank are gone. They need to keep moving this way and keep getting in and amongst the guts there. Ooh. Well, there goes the Mirkwood General, killed off by the Fountain Guard that are behind enemy lines from Darkwolf 44. Elder Councillor over here, and yeah, this is the thing. Like, the worst thing the red team could have done was just to funnel all their troops into that killing field, but they didn't, and that could be absolutely vital as this fight goes along. Having said that, Elven King's Palace Guard have been committed forward, as of the Hiri Lung. These are the damage dealing units that Mirkwood had for their infantry, and that could be enough to turn this fight in Mirkwood's favour, at least temporarily. I mean, you can see more strong units coming forward. Harbingers of Castamere, of Rhun starting to head around the sides as well. Nirun Aru Sentinels and a Dunaim Shield Guard. In the end, it may be that Mirkwood, leaving Arthedain essentially defend for themselves in favour of trying to leave a lot in reserve in the late game, might not pan out. There's not a lot of runic forces over here, but they can still get behind this line and start wrapping it up. I mean, this Hiri Lung needs to block the advance of the runic forces, and that is what Sin is going to do, but more troublesome units are going to arrive on the front line. Nirun Aru Sentinels, definitely not what needed to be seen. Hiri Lung blocking the rear charge at the very least, but there are Dragon's Wrath crossbows here, there are Phalanx units here. Can Mirkwood get their archers back online? I mean, the answer to that I think is going to be yes, because the Fountain Guard have been torn apart with immediate effect, and I think the Elder Council can claim a lot of responsibility for that. Those armour-piercing Javies, and now the Wardens of Amon Lank, the Elders of the Elven King, and the Greenwood Rangers should be able to get back into position, and that could be absolutely vital, because they will then be able to start firing once again into these positions. And Rhun blobbing up a little bit, I think they needed to spread out a bit more, because now they're nice and blobbed up for enemy archers and javelins to start shooting into them, and so that flanking assault may come to nothing in the end. Bouncer forces is even on the front line. Very strong units battling against one another. Not often you see the Nimlothian Honor Guard broken, but there they are. Arrows still flying back and forth from both sides, but Mirkwood definitely have the advantage in that respect now. In come the Veterans of Osgiliath, now out of ammunition. Oh, that was so nearly a very nice hit on the Hiri Peng there from the catapult. But unfortunately for them, coming to nothing once more. Hiri Lung. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. It's interesting that that's the assessment over here. I mean, over here with the Fountain Guard and Alcarondas Legion at their strongest, they're still winning. The Elven King's Palace Guard is pretty much on their own holding the line at this point, with a few Woodland Round Patrol to back them up. They're going to need the support of those archers over on the other side of the river, which they are going to get now, I think. And with that, that should be enough, because back here, Rhun are being cleaned up by the Hiri Lung. The Elder Council are now moving closer, and those javelins, as well as the arrows coming in, should be enough to really start having an impact. The Nirun Aru Sentinels are over here as well, though. Still, the infantry advantage rests in favour of the red team. It's just a question of whether or not they can kill off the Mirkwood infantry quickly enough to start closing down the javelins and archers, which are the real threat that Mirkwood pose at this point. More units coming forward now. Arthedain Shield Guard, 110 of them. It's a fairly significant addition to the front line at this late stage. There's still ranged units. Castamir's Rangers doing their thing. Like, Rangers for the red team as well. Definitely not insignificant at this stage, but the Javelins need to start doing their thing a little bit more quickly than they're currently doing, I think. An actual good hit there from the catapult, right into the middle of Mirkwood's position. Still Dragon's Wrath crossbows over here. Only 8 of them remaining there. The catapult's trying to go for the Elder Council. Very narrow misses all around. Something else to bear in mind is, will the infantry have what it takes to take on the Wardens of Amon Lank and the Elves of the Elven King after going through all of the units they've gone through over there? And the Greenwood Rangers. Dunedain Trollslayers still doing their thing. Very strong javelins they throw, to be honest with you. And 12 of them could make a big difference as well at this late stage with how close it's been already. Arthedain Shield Guard closing the distance to the Elder Council. More arrows flying in. And Castamir's Rangers. Yeah, there are the Silverthorns. Knocking all of those units over. Ooh, close to being a pretty devastating hit there, but the Wardens of Amon Lank moving forward. Those axes and that AP will be a very welcome sight on the front line for the Mirkwood forces that are still fighting. Elder Council have been closed down, and the Arthedain Shield Guard are the stronger melee combatants, certainly. But the Elder Council will hold the line as best as they are able for a little while longer. But over here, this is where the primary hope of the red team rests, I think. With the Nairu Naaru Sentinels, there's Citadel Guard, there's Harbingers of Castamere. Hiri Peng, I think, are trying to shoot them, but there's still javelins coming in. I'd still go in favour of Mirkwood at this point, to be honest with you. I just feel as though that's where this battle's going. Marksmen of Caer Andros are wavering. Force pathing their way through Hiri Lung that are still fighting. And this is the thing with the elves, of course. Even their ranged units are able to put up a decent fight in melee, which makes them quite difficult to finish off in a situation like this. Even if they do close down some of these units like the Hiri Peng, like, they will put up a decent fight of it. Although against Harbingers of Castamere, they will be more likely to be finished off. To be honest. Elves of the Elven King, Greenwood Rangers have taken a bit of a beating at this point. Wardens of Amon Lank moving forwards, Elder Council in support of them. The Elven King's Palace Guard have still been fighting. Like, they've been outnumbered and surrounded by elite infantry units for quite a while at this point, and yet they're still putting up a fight. Such a strong unit of infantry that Mirkwood have at their disposal. And now they're finally going to get some support actually from the Wardens of Amon Lank, which might be enough to give Mirkwood the victory over on this side of things. With Elder Council over here. So yeah, I just think having those Elders of the Elven King in the back pocket here is going to be what makes the difference for Mirkwood. Like, it's going to put it beyond the red team, I think. And a very close affair it was. More arrows being loosed. Harbingers of Castamere. Yeah, I mean, the Harbingers of Castamere are really the only ace in the pack that Umbar have left, because while they do have the Nairu Naaru Sentinels, there's only 15 of them. 55 Harbingers is a fairly significant number though, but when you consider that there's still 53 Elves of the Elven King, that's a relatively even fight. Everywhere else, I mean, yeah, it's close, but over here you can see that this fight now, with the arrival of the Wardens of Amon Lank, they really started to do a lot of damage to these Alcarondas Legion over here that were trying to finish off the Palace Guard. Hiri Peng also getting into position. I think they're going to try and chase down the catapult crew. Speaking of which, I think actually that was already being done by the Elder Council, so Sin shutting down the last threats that remain to his chances of victory. Crossbowmen and Marksmen of Caer Andros. It's been a valiant effort, I'd have to say, from both sides, but I suppose this is one of those examples where if you're going to leave your allies to fend for themselves, don't send, like, go all in on that respect. Make sure that you have enough to defend yourself in the late game, because if Mirkwood had sent forward just, like, even a couple of units of Blades of Amenduia, you know, that would have been enough of a difference, I think, to give Red Team enough of an advantage here in the late game for them to go on to win it. So, if you're that's really the moral of the story, I guess. If you're going to hang your ally out to dry, do it properly. Do it. Go all in on it. Don't pretend to help them by sending forward like 1 or 2 units. He did send forward his cavalry, to be fair, but cavalry is never going to be useful in a situation like this, so that makes a little bit more sense. So, yeah, and it's proof that you don't necessarily need to save an ally that's struggling. I do remember a fight that I posted just after Christmas, I think it was, where the hobbits tried to save a Rudauer army that was completely doomed, and in the end they ended up just doing more damage to themselves. Like, there was no need to try and save them. Like, there comes a point when they're beyond saving, and you just need to accept that. And I think Arthedain, when that rapid assault came forward eventually from Gondor and Umbar, Mirkwood could have maybe backed them up, but it would have taken a little while. Arthedain would have been damaged anyway, and I think Sin ultimately did the right thing by mostly abandoning him. And sometimes that's what you need to do. There's still 3,000 frames left in this fight, which kind of surprises me, to be honest with you. Still Silverthorn arrows being loosed. Shooting into something. Harbingers of Castamere, still 24 of them, I suppose. Trying to chase the Elder Council off. They're trying to remount that catapult crew, but Mirkwood is making life as difficult as possible for them. And I think it's too little too late for them. Still the Palace Guard fighting hard. They've been fighting for a long time at this point. Their hit points are almost certainly gone. Over here, meanwhile, the rest of the Adunheim Shield Guard and the Narun Aru units, utterly surrounded by Hiri Peng, Wardens of Amon Lank, and also Elders of the Elven King. So that is going to be the end of them, and I think sensing that, they're going to pull off some of these units over here to try and deal, probably with the Harbingers of Castamere, to be honest with you. Yeah, they're going to use the Silverthorn arrows here to finish off what's left of the Umbar forces fighting here. Amron! That seems like overkill. He must have taken about 10 arrows then at point blank range. Reloading. Illidan. Taking a friendly fire actually there into the Elder Council. And they are now shaken. I mean, obviously the Harbingers of Castamere. The superior unit. The catapult is managing to remount, but that won't last too long, to be honest with you. The Wardens of Amon Lank are on the way. Silverthorn arrows are being loosed into the Harbingers. In come the Axemen. And I think that's it. Yeah, the catapult crew now broken. So the final glimmer of hope for the red team disappears with the Gondorian catapult crew. It's interesting that the Gondorian trebuchet crew has the Citadel Guard model, but the catapult crew is just sort of basic Gondor archers without the armour upgrade. Kind of an interesting one. I still wonder if the Gondor trebuchet crew actually behaves like spearmen, or whether it's just an aesthetic change. I know that in Silmarillion the artillery crew men have their own sort of stats and their own uses, but I'm not sure whether it's just cosmetic in Reforged or whether it is like genuinely like, you know, they're spearmen. They're like Citadel Guard in melee. In which case the trebuchet would be a very good thing to bring in most cases, to be honest with you, over the catapult, even at increased cost, because the crew themselves will actually be useful as well as the trebuchet being more damaging and more accurate. Forward come the Greenwood Rangers. The final stand of Umbar around the Gondorian catapults and next to this tree. And Mirkwood are going to shoot them with the Greenwood Rangers. Harbingers of Castamere, of course, are a very resilient unit indeed. The Palace Guard have survived this fight as well, which again is a mark of their quality. Given the situation they were in, it's quite remarkable, to be honest with you, that they are still alive. But here they stand. Very, very nice indeed. Indeed, Castamere himself is still standing, although I can't imagine that will last too much longer. It's been an interesting fight, and I think the map itself actually lends itself quite well to this sort of fight, to be honest with you. Very varied fates. We saw very different engagements, like 3 major ones, one over here of course, one here in the middle, and then one over on the front between Rhun and Imladris. And the red team technically won both of the earlier ones, but it was at such a cost that they ended up not being able to win the third, final and most crucial engagement. At the end? No, Harbingers of Castamere still here. Castamere himself going up against the Elders of the Elven King. None of the generals will survive this fight. Every single faction's general was killed on the battlefield today. But a very enjoyable fight it was. I'm always glad to see a new map. And a very high quality battle too. Very close. Yeah, not too surprising. Within 2%. A very small amount of Mirkwood's army is all that remains from this carnage. Castamere himself surely will fall. We're within the final 200 frames, so yeah, there he goes. With one swing of the sword, and that's going to be it. As we pan out from the trees, yeah, very nice battle. Sin never fails.
But fate has been kind and delivered us victory.
Never a disappointing battle from Sin. And there we go. So, having a look at the kills, Sin getting the most, which shouldn't be too surprising, like Mirkwood. Ranged focused elven armies often, and quality focused elven armies do tend to get high kill counts, because obviously they're smaller as well. Imladris with the smallest army, getting a decent kill count as well against a more numerous runic one, but ultimately losing because of course they ended up losing too much of that limited manpower and ended up getting crippled when Gondor and Umbar came to their support. Gondor getting the most kills from the red team, which actually does surprise me maybe a little bit. But yeah, I mean, militia focused armies, I guess what did the damage for them was when Arthedain started to fall apart. Their elite units like their Citadel Guard and their Fountain Guard were really well placed to capitalise on that. Umbar getting the least, which again, considering they're probably the most quality focused of all the attackers, the red team armies, is maybe a little bit surprising, but all of it was in the same sort of ballpark, I guess. Y2K 86 of Arthedain getting the fewest kills. Actually no, he got more than Umbar at the very least, but still obviously getting the fewest kills on his team because of the situation he was put into. But in the end, he did manage to do at least enough damage so that Sin could go on to win the battle for his team, which is all he could have asked of himself in that sort of situation. And you have to say as well that Gondorian, if the Gondorians had put their elite units forward with their militia initially and they've managed to crush Arthedain a little bit more efficiently, that could have been the difference. But then when the battle is this close, when it's within 2%, like, you can really put your finger on anything. Any mistake really that they could have made that maybe cost them the battle in the end. But I think no one really played that badly. I think it was just a well executed plan from Sin primarily to sort of leave his allies to weaken the enemy, and then he could come in and finish them off. Like, it's the sort of thing which newer players will try to do, to be honest with you. Like, they'll obviously execute it far worse than Sin did here, but you'll see time and time again like people wanting to save themselves for the late game and then come forward with quality to win it then. Like, it's a very commonplace thing for newer players to try and do, but that's how you do it properly. Like, that's how you do it well. Very well done it was. Let's see what did the damage for Mirkwood. Huntsman of Amelnlank and Sindar of the Girdle. Both cavalry units doing very well, to be honest with you. I mean, the Sindar of the Girdle, to be fair, most of those kills were probably on like militia tier units and archers, and also the Corsair crossbows. Corsair crossbows is probably the most expensive unit they killed, to be honest. But still a good kill count, and still, you know, managed to do some damage. Warns of Amelnlank, probably, you know, one of the more effective units in melee and at range. Here he pang. So yeah, all of the archers doing very well. Greenwood Rangers getting a lot of kills in a very short space of time, and they were sort of shut down to an extent, the Greenwood Rangers. Like, enemy archers did cut them down. The Fountain Guard stopped them from firing for a little while, so it could have been far worse for the red team. But in the end, over 200 kills, and some of those would have been on stuff like Elkarondas Legion and higher end Gondorian troops as well. So good quality kills at that. Other than that, mixed fortunes for some of the infantry. Like, the infantry fight was always more of a case of hold them in place for the archers to do the work. Some of them did quite well, like obviously the Palace Guard did, because that's what you'd expect from them. The Emondouir, like Blades of Emondouir breaking 100 kills, but the Hiri Lung, one of them only getting 42, so they obviously were getting overwhelmed, I think, by the runic flank. But yeah, overall, pretty much what you'd expect from Mirkwood. Like, their infantry was just there to hold for the cavalry and the archers to get some of the big kills. But yeah, very high quality battle. Good to see a new map as well, and a good map it is as well. So very varied, and yeah, always good to showcase one of those. Big thank you to Sin for sending it in, and I'll always accept more should they be forthcoming. And also well played to the players as well. Like, there wasn't really a bad performance here, as you'd expect. Like, all of these players have played plenty of the game before, so there was no glaringly obvious errors to be had here. But yeah, not sure what's going to be next. Like, this one was sent to me very recently, but I wanted to do it because obviously it's a new map, so obviously it gets more of a preference. But I'm not sure what's going to be next. Like, I do have a few that I can choose from. Again, it kind of depends on my schedule. Like, on my days off, obviously I can do sort of larger scale siege battles without too many issues. But when I'm recording sort of midweek, should I need to, it becomes a little bit more tricky, because obviously then you've got like the university schedule to try and wrap around as well. So I'm not really sure what's going to be next, but we'll see. It will probably be Reforged though, because still I haven't got any Silmarillion stuff that I can showcase. And there are like replays that I can take from the Silmarillion Discord that I could show. But generally speaking, I sort of put more preference on replays that I get sent, because generally speaking it does more often than not tend to be higher quality battles. Sometimes it's just because someone wants to show off and say, oh, look how well I did in this battle, I want this to be shown, even though it's like 100 to 50 in terms of percentage by the end and it's just a complete one-sided slaughter. But that's rare now, I think. I haven't had one of those in quite a long time, so if anyone does have any good quality Silmarillion stuff they want to send me, then do feel free, because I do want to show off more of Silmarillion, because there's some good stuff going on there. But if not, then I will be doing more Reforged, because I do have a good base of replays I can pull from for Reforged. But we shall see. Like I said, like, the end of these videos isn't really the place to talk about any of the new stuff that I want to do, or any of the schedule stuff that might happen in the further future. Again, these are the things that are sort of still a little bit murky, because I myself don't know how things are going to work out sort of in the mid to long term. But if anything sort of dramatic does happen, at least with regards to change the schedule, it will be in a channel update video. It won't just be wedged at the end of one of these. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.